I'm going to spend the weekend at my parents' house. I asked my husband if everything was okay as a response to his sudden declaration. It's my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. I figured I should celebrate with them. Really? Then I should go too, right? I thought about it, but it's their anniversary, not a birthday. I'd feel bad dragging you away from your busy work schedule. He was right. I'd be coming off a night shift that day. I decided to embrace his words as a chance to relax at home. I get along well with his parents, and they always take good care of me. Maybe I can send something later to celebrate. My name is Rachel. I'm a nurse, and I'm 32. I met my husband John 3 years ago. We've been married for 2 years now. It feels like we've been together for a long time, but it was nothing compared to his parents' 40 years. His parents have a beautiful relationship, always going out together and even holding hands while taking walks. I look up to them, especially since my parents are divorced. I've always dreamed of having a similar kind of relationship with my husband. One Friday night, John came home with bags full of groceries. I'm cooking at home tomorrow. Cooking is a hobby of his, and he's quite good at it. While I tend to focus on whether something is edible, John is the type who relentlessly pursues the deliciousness of food. We usually take turns cooking, and John's meals are always delicious. But of course they are. He uses quality ingredients. The worst part is, he always leaves me to do the dishes. Not just the dishes, but the pots and pans too. I've asked him to not just cook, but to do the dishes as well. But he never seemed to listen. Don't leave the dishes for your mother to take care of, okay? I reminded him, not wanting to burden his mother on such a special day. He brushed it off with a casual, yeah, as if he didn't take it too seriously, which left me feeling slightly irritated. I asked him to say hi to his parents for me, and started getting ready for my night shift. The following day after my shift, I was woken up by a call on my cell phone. It was from my father-in-law. This was unusual, because my mother-in-law is usually the one to call. As I answered the phone, I heard my father-in-law's frantic voice on the other end. Rachel, my wife has collapsed. What should I do? What? I jumped out of bed and asked my father-in-law for details. Apparently, she suddenly collapsed, and it seems she has a fever. It's been pretty hot out, so it could be a heat stroke. She was only half conscious, and so I told him to call an ambulance and to let me know when he found out where she'd be taken. I decided to drive to my in-laws' house, which is about a 40-minute drive from my home. I tried calling my husband, but he didn't pick up or call back. As I started to give up on trying to reach him, my father-in-law called again. As suspected, she had a heat stroke and had been rushed to the hospital. I arrived at the hospital and found my father-in-law. He told me that my mother-in-law's condition wasn't critical and is that she is currently receiving an IV. I made my way towards her hospital room. By the way, where's John? Is he in her room? My father-in-law looked puzzled. Wasn't he with you? I tried calling him first, but couldn't get through, so I called you. I assumed he was driving. Hearing this, I furrowed my brow in confusion. But John was over at your place, wasn't he? Now it was my father-in-law's turn to furrow his brow. We exchanged puzzled looks as we walked, but our conversation was interrupted as we reached my mother-in-law's room. Thank God it's nothing serious. Upon hearing that, my mother-in-law, who seemed less energetic than usual, smiled. I'm sorry for all the trouble. Were you at work today? I just finished my night shift, actually. Where's John? Is he working? These words hit me. He said he was heading over to cook you guys a special anniversary meal. The three of us exchanged glances. Feeling that something was off, I tried calling John again. Finally, after several attempts, I managed to get through to him. Oh, thank goodness. Where are you? He responded with something completely unexpected. I'm at my parents', cooking up a storm as filial duty. Sure enough, I heard the sound of chopping over the phone. I managed to think quickly and covered up my confusion. Ah, I see. I must have been half asleep. Sorry about that. You're probably tired from work. I told them you were working, so rest up. John insisted that he was at his parents' place. But his parents were right in front of me. So who on earth was John cooking for? Was he cheating on me? Did he show any signs of it elsewhere? I tried to recall our past interactions, but I couldn't remember anything that might confirm such a suspicion. If I had to point out something, he has been coming home late more often, and I happened to find a receipt from a store for beer and hard seltzer a while ago. I asked about the hard seltzer because John only drinks beer, but he told me that he bought some drinks with a colleague on their way home. They had a venting session while having drinks. I found it understandable and accepted his explanation. These points alone didn't constitute conclusive evidence. As I contemplated such thoughts, my concerned father-in-law came out of the room to check on me. Is something wrong? Is John coming? It seems like he had to make an unexpected stop at work. He needs to take care of some trouble, and he might have to work through the night today. I quickly made up a lie. I see. I'm sorry to put you through all of this. It looks like everything's fine now, so go home and rest. Upon hearing my father-in-law's words, I nodded and headed home. If John really was having an affair, what should I do? If he was going to come home soon, it might be best to pretend to know nothing. I still loved John, and I get along well with his parents. John was always concerned about me, whether it was about my work or my health. He always showed care and worry. Pondering my next move, I arrived home and decided to do a little digging into my husband's belongings. I entered his room. But since I go in there all the time, I didn't find anything suspicious. When I got back to the living room, I noticed a computer. I have my own laptop, so I never used this one. Maybe I'd find something. I opened up the browser history. It seemed he'd been browsing travel sites. Specifically, he was looking at hotels with kitchens. Was that why he was stocking up on groceries? Was he planning to take it to a romantic getaway with a mistress? Still, I wasn't suspicious of my husband to that extent yet. Even today, he might be gathering with friends for all I know. He might have lied about going to his parents' place because he felt guilty about going to have fun while I worked. But the next moment, that thought crumbled. I found a bookmark for a site that allows you to save photos. With a sense of dread, I looked and found definitive evidence of an affair. There were many photos of John with another woman, at dating spots, amusement parks, and some of which looked like they were on a trip somewhere. There were even some nude ones among them. What's more, it seems that it's been happening since shortly after we got married. Which meant I had been deceived by John for 2 years. Once I realized that, I knew I couldn't continue living like this. I also found their email exchanges. I learned from an email that the other woman shared the same birthday as me. Reading through the emails and looking at the photos, I saw that he gifted her jewelry and watches for her birthdays. On my birthdays, he gave me practical things like aprons to help with housework or recipe books to improve my cooking. The difference in gifts given to the mistress was like night and day. Moreover, the mistress was the one he'd been celebrating on the day of our shared birthday. I often worked night shifts, so our schedules didn't always match, but I never thought she was the higher priority. My feelings towards John took a complete 180-degree turn. The mistress was a junior colleague of John's. She even came to our wedding. I remember she came up to me and said, "I have the same birthday as you." Judging from the emails, it seemed like the mistress initiated the affair, but John had easily accepted her invitations to go out. I discovered an email where he said, "My wife earns a decent income, and she nurses me without complaints when I'm sick, so I don't plan on divorcing her for now." Upon finding this, there was no way I could stay silent. I decided on divorce. I captured some of this evidence on my phone. Upon realizing that it was already midnight, I decided to go to bed. The next day, I started looking for a divorce attorney, but I had no idea which one to choose. Just as I was lost in my thoughts, the doorbell rang. I flinched, thinking that my husband might have come home. But when I went to open the door, it turned out to be my mother-in-law. Startled, I invited her in. I learned that she returned home from the hospital yesterday, right after she got her IV, and was now here to thank me. She even brought me a small gift. As I spoke with my mother-in-law, a sense of sadness began to overwhelm me. I was lucky to have such wonderful in-laws, and the thought of leaving them was heartbreaking. Seeing my distress, my mother-in-law spoke to me kindly. "If something's bothering you, you can talk to me about it." Moved by her words, I couldn't help but pour out everything to her. When I finished, I was worried that she might be angry at what I'd said about her son. "Is that true? That's unforgivable." I showed her the evidence of John's infidelity, and she became more incensed. "Cheating makes no one happy. Why would John do something like this?" Then, to my surprise, my mother-in-law made a proposal I hadn't expected. "Rachel, why don't you pack your bags and come to our house?" "What?" While I was still surprised, my mother-in-law started making a phone call. It seemed she was talking to my father-in-law. I heard her telling him to prepare a room at their home. Encouraged by my mother-in-law, I began to pack my things. The immediate essentials I needed were just a change of clothes and my laptop. We decided on moving out the bigger items later. After I loaded my bag into my car and my mother-in-law got settled, we drove to her house where my father-in-law greeted us. There was a woman I didn't recognize sitting in the living room. Just as I was wondering who she was, I learned she was a lawyer. My father-in-law had reached out to her at my mother-in-law's request. "You have to act quickly in situations like this." He seemed quite pleased with himself as he said. In front of my in-laws, I expressed to the lawyer that I wanted a divorce and that I intended to claim alimony. I struggled to keep up with the sudden turns of events, but expressing my intentions gave me a sense of determination. The thought that I was being treated like a cash cow, belittled by my husband and his mistress, made my blood boil. Even his own parents were furious at his behavior. That night, I received a phone call from home. "Where are you? I dropped my cell phone in water and couldn't contact you. Sorry." The moment I heard John's voice, my anger peaked. "I've moved out. It's up to you to decide whether you want to stay or move out. I'll collect the rest of my belongings by the end of the week." Upon hearing this, John started panicking. "What? What are you talking about? What's happening?" At his words, I felt nothing but anger. "You've been cheating on me, and now you're asking me what's happening?" John, seemingly confused, started spouting nonsense. "Cheat? Me? Why? How?" He seemed eager to ask how I found out. That was when my mother-in-law took the phone from me. "Come home immediately!" "Huh? Mom? What?" Ignoring my confused husband, I hung up the phone. Less than an hour later, John arrived at his parents' house. "Rachel, what's going on? Why are you here?" I sighed at John, who rushed in after hastily opening the door. "How did it feel to serve homemade meals to your mistress in a hotel with a kitchen?" Upon hearing this, John went pale. "How did you have the nerve to say that you were going to celebrate your parents' 40th anniversary with a homemade meal? You had the audacity to go on trips with your lover while your mother was in the hospital." "Huh? What happened to Mom?" Then, at that moment, John's father came out and started yelling. "Your mother was taken away in an ambulance. I called you several times. You're not welcome in this house after today. Once we're done talking, don't ever show your face here again. Also, I want you to return the car you drove here. It's still in my name." John's father snatched the car keys from him. Because John commutes by car, I knew how inconvenient it would be for him to have this option taken away. Inwardly, I felt a bitter sense of satisfaction. Later, my mother-in-law came out and shouted, "We know everything about your shameful affair. Your father and I are on Rachel's side, not yours." Our lawyer had already left, so I directly expressed my intention to get a divorce. John panicked with a pale face. "Divorce? We can't." "Why?" "I always help with household chores. I even cook." At my husband's desperate reaction, all I was able to do was sigh. "Helping out with household chores? You mean taking out the trash or putting away laundry? You don't even know how to use the washing machine. Have you ever cleaned the bathroom or the toilet? But I cook. His words made me snap. You claim to be cooking, but cooking is complete when you clean up afterwards. You buy fancy ingredients, cook, and then act all smug saying, "Isn't it delicious?" Well, of course it's delicious. Shouldn't you be considering the food expenses when cooking? John retorted, obviously irritated. Huh? My dishes taste way better than yours. Cleaning up is easy. It's the cooking that's hard. Just yesterday, my girl told me everything was delicious. He was obviously referring to his mistress. Well, of course, in a hotel kitchen, you don't have to worry about cleaning up. She got to enjoy the expensive food you bought with your money, so of course, she thought it was delicious. John, who didn't like my tone, yelled back, Fine then, let's get a divorce or whatever. I'm done with you. He stormed out of the house. With his car keys taken away by my father-in-law, he reluctantly started walking. He looked pathetic from the back. The following day, I closed the bank account from which our living expenses were being withdrawn from. I wasn't going to pay for rent or any of the utility bills with my money anymore. I sent the divorce papers to John and made sure to include a substantial claim for property division and compensation for emotional distress. John, perhaps out of rage, agreed to the divorce and even the financial terms. He made a single payment to cover the expenses, but it appears that his savings fell short and he had to take out a loan from a consumer loan company. When I went to pick up my belongings later, I saw some unfamiliar items in the house. Perhaps the mistress had moved in. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Of course, I demanded compensation from the mistress through my lawyer as well. A month later, I received a phone call from my ex-husband. I'm receiving bills for rent and electricity. He just realized it now. Well, that's to be expected since the bills weren't being automatically withdrawn anymore. Of course you received them. I've closed the bank account we were using for withdrawals. My ex-husband was speechless. Why should I be responsible for paying rent for a place I don't even live in? Your standard of living will have to drop a bit, but you guys will figure it out. Although I doubt you can afford to keep living there on your salary. With that, I hung up the phone. He makes about half of what I make. If he pays the rent, he'll hardly have any money left for living expenses. The truth is, I had been covering a significant portion of our living expenses. My ex-husband later asked to reconcile, but of course I ignored him. According to John's parents, he became uncomfortable at his job and quit. He showed up at their place, but his father turned him away. I had already moved out of his parents' house and rented an apartment. I don't communicate with my ex-husband anymore, but I occasionally get in touch with his parents, and we still have a good relationship. Seeing them walking hand in hand to this day, I made up my mind to find someone with whom I could eventually have such a relationship.